the economics of immigration. It's one of the most divisive topics for debate and discussion today in the United States because it touches on race, sex, national origin, crime, the use of public services. The list goes on and on and on. What I'm going to try to do today is to shed some light on this topic, going all the way back to the 1790s and look at immigration statistics and the impact of immigration on the United States economy and more particularly the construction market. I'm going to introduce the idea of immigrants as complements as well as immigrants as substitutes. Let's go ahead and get started. There's three big topics I'm going to speak to today. Number one, immigration history. Number two, what the impacts are to growth and prosperity and labor market effects of immigration. And lastly, I'm going to make a modest proposal. I can't claim this modest proposal my own, but it is from Representative Maria Salazar from the great state of Florida, who laid out what she refers to as the Dignity Act. And I'm going to shed some light on the key components of that act and hopefully cause you to support it. With that, let me begin with this idea that going all the way back to the 1790s, the U.S. has been preoccupied with legislation, policy, and practice as it relates to immigration. Almost all of this activity is restrictive in nature in some fashion. Yet time and time again, what you see when you look back over the arc of history is that immigrant populations have transformed the size, the shape, and the nature of America. And looking forward, they will likely do so again. Today, more than 1 in 8 Americans are immigrants, and almost all are descendants of immigrants. Less than 2% of the U.S. population have Native American ancestors. So next, I want to talk about this idea of growth, prosperity, and labor market effects of immigration. There's a host of topics that we're going to speak to as it relates to this, and I want to help you understand some of the math behind it. So I want to take you back to where we started in the beginning, this idea or worldview as immigrants as a complement to native-born and citizen labor, immigrants as a substitute for native-born or citizen labor. The idea of complements is that immigrants come into the United States and do not displace native-born workers, but act as a growth factor or an increase to the economy, versus the concept of immigrants as substitutes, meaning that they are going to displace native-born or citizen workers and not necessarily increase or result in the increase in the growth of the economy. So with that, I want to walk through some statistics with you. First of all, we're going to look at the relationship between immigration and unemployment. We're going to look at the relationship between immigration and workforce participation, the relationship between immigration and gross domestic product, the relationship between immigration and the consumer price index or inflationary pressure. And then I'm going to revisit this idea of substitutes and complements. And I'm also going to touch on this idea of the impact of public services from an immigration standpoint, wage impacts, and then capital investment impacts. So first, let's look at immigrant impact to unemployment. So these statistics go all the way back to the 1940s and look at what the results are. You see in this particular chart a comparison of legal immigration, illegal immigration, compared to the general unemployment rate and the construction unemployment rate. What the math shows, there is no correlation between these figures over this time period. And so what this implies is that immigrant labor is not a substitute for native-born labor. Now with that said, we know mathematically that you cannot pour an unlimited amount of immigrant labor into an economy and have all of it absorbed. But when you look backwards in time over this era, what you see is that unemployment is unaffected by immigration, which means that these individuals have been absorbed into the workforce and are contributing to economic growth and are not directly impacting unemployment. Another nuance here is the U.S. is a giant country. Most of the immigration is coming in on coastal borders or land borders, and it is possible that that immigrant population has a more extreme impact in those cities counties, or even those states. But what we're looking at here in this case is the totality of the U.S., and I ask that you shape your view to look at the totality of the U.S. in terms of the benefit that occurs. So again, just to reiterate, immigrant population, legal and illegal, has no correlation to unemployment statistics going back to the 1940s. Second, workforce participation. So let me share with you the definition of workforce participation. It's made up of all the individuals between ages 17 and 65 who could be employed and might take home a W-2 or a 1099. So what percentage of those individuals are receiving a W-2 or 1099? Some portion of the population always is not working. Some of them might be students. Some of them might be homemakers. Some of them might be individuals that are between jobs and searching for employment. We never have workforce participation of 100%. There are two interesting spikes in workforce participation. One was in the 1940s during the Second World War as women entered the workforce in order to take jobs that had previously been occupied by men who were fighting conflicts in Asia and in Europe. The second is the 1970s when women began to more aggressively enter the workforce. And you see workforce participation peak in that 1940s period and in that late 1970s, early 1980s time period. And then we stayed at a high level and we've been trending down since the late 90s slightly. Now what you see when you look at legal and illegal immigration compared to workforce participation is a strong positive correlation. What that implies is that immigrant labor is a complement to domestic labor, not a substitute. And so when you see these trends over this period of time, those individuals who have come to the United States, both legally and illegally, have been absorbed into the workforce and have not displaced native-born or citizen workforce. Third, when you look at legal and illegal immigration in comparison to gross domestic product, what you see there is no statistical correlation again. What this implies is that there is no direct relationship between economic growth and illegal or legal immigration. Said another way, these individuals are absorbed into the economy and do not result in some type of slowdown of economic growth as those immigrants have come. Fourth, legal and illegal immigration compared to the consumer price index or inflationary pressure. Now, what you might see here is a connection between immigrant population and inflationary pressure. What shows up in the math? There is no correlation, meaning that higher legal or illegal immigration is not resulting in higher or lower inflationary pressure. So said another way, immigrant populations across the totality of the U.S. has not resulted in an increase or a decrease in wages, which is one of the measures of inflation. Now, what I'd like for you to do looking forwards is to try to figure out how do we create an opportunity for there to be more effective legal immigration, key on more, and secondly, more effective border control to reduce or eliminate illegal immigration. And the Dignity Act proposed by Maria Salazar, representative of the state of Florida, is one of the methods to do that. As you've heard, there's great opportunity with the Dignity Act as proposed in 2023. As you're thinking through your perspectives on immigration, I want to take you back to where we started. Immigrants as complements, immigrants as substitutes. What the data shows is that immigrants fall more likely into the complement category and support growth and innovation throughout the United States. And when you look back over the arc of history, what you find is that immigrant populations have supported that growth and supported construction of infrastructure in the U.S. time and time again. As Representative Salazar from the great state of Florida laid out, there's an opportunity to fill the gap of over 40 years without any consequential immigration legislation. Let's find a way to support the Dignity Act in 2023. Thank you very much.